A very good evening to you, dear East Africans. Thank you very much for joining us here on KTN News for Bottomline East Africa, where we focus on stories that have been making headlines throughout the week in the East African region. And part of our discussion this hour, we'll be speaking to Joseph Kioko, who is a public policy analyst on the policy and politics of the East African region. Remember, it is an election year for Kenya and Rwanda. It's the month of August for Rwanda, date 4 for Kenya, date 8. So we will be looking at the dynamics surrounding the politics in these two countries, and of course Uganda, Tanzania, Somalia, South Sudan. Stay tuned for that conversation. My name is Akisa Wandera. Bottomline East Africa begins now. Now, Rock Ajulu is a professor who we lost about a week ago, and he was laid to rest today. That is among the stories we will be having on top of our agenda this hour. But before we get to that, South Sudan has rejected peacekeepers to the East Africa, of course, United Nations peacekeepers to the country. That is also a story that we have lined up for you. And an East African report now indicates that clampdowns and some arrests have been made in various areas in the East African region, various countries. And it's a report that was released today. We will Zinzi Kibiko will be taking us through that particular story here on Bottomline East Africa. Do not go too far. Now, a report indicates that clampdowns by governments in East Africa on peaceful protests and free expression are severely threatening human rights in the region in a year that ended 2016. That's the year that just ended. Human Rights Watch, in a 687-page report, names Ethiopia, Kenya and Uganda as some of the countries with gross human rights violations. Our reporter Zinzi Kibiku has more details from that report.
In its 27th edition of Human Rights Review, in more than 90 countries, Human Rights Watch says government security forces in Ethiopia, as well as in Uganda and Kenya, used unnecessary and top-heavy forces to disperse largely peaceful protests, causing deaths and injuries. In Ethiopia, hundreds of protesters were killed in 2016. East African governments also used a range of tactics to restrain criticism, government policies, and obstruct the work of journalists, according to the rights body. Across the region, governments failed to investigate and prosecute security forces personnel for serious human rights abuses. Still in Ethiopia, state security forces violently suppressed widespread protests against government policies, killing hundreds of people and detaining tens of thousands. The Ethiopian government has failed to meaningfully investigate the killings of protesters and other abuses.
Killings have not been investigated up to now. If you take the example of Ethiopia, Ethiopia has had a problem of unrests. 2015 and then 2016, in July 2016, the Oromo community had unrests, and the Ethiopian government clamped down on those unrests very violently.
Conflict and persecution in South Sudan, Somalia and Burundi, among other countries, prompted East African countries to host hundreds of thousands of refugees with mixed results. The report says that while Uganda has worked to find ways to integrate refugees, the Kenyan government violated its commitments under the international refugee law by announcing the closure of the Dadaab refugee camp, predominantly inhabited by Somali refugees. Refugees, particularly in Kenya, faced threats of forced return. The decision forced thousands of Somali refugees to return home despite ongoing armed conflict there, and left those remaining in fear of their safety and future.
Failure of the international community to take action when human rights violations have happened, and the rise of leaders who have little respect for human rights, especially in the region, security being treated as a priority to human rights. In reality, the two are not mutually exclusive. Right. You can still have deal with security concerns, but still respect human rights.
During Uganda's 2016 elections, Government officials and police arrested and beat over a dozen journalists, in some cases during live broadcasts. At least 8 Kenyan journalists and bloggers were arrested and charged under what Human Rights Watch calls vaguely worded provisions in new laws. In both Ethiopia and Uganda, at times of heightened criticism of the government, the authorities blocked access to the internet and social media networks, saying that it was necessary for security reasons.
There are institutions within the same government which can do the investigations. The police can investigate. There are also human rights institutions that, like the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, can do the investigation. There is IPOA which can do the investigation. There is the Office of the Ombudsman, right, which can also do the investigation. And there are similar institutions across other countries which can also carry out the investigations. That's why in most of those countries it is important to ensure that these institutions are strengthened and facilitated to ensure that they work as required. So in most cases it is still within the same government that the investigations will.
In some instances, governments or national courts took positive steps to improve avenues for redress for victims of human rights abuses. The president of Somalia signed a law establishing a National Human Rights Commission that can receive complaints and monitor prisons and unlawful detention facilities. Zinzi Kibiku, KTN News.
And here in Kenya, a funeral service has been held for renowned scholar and activist, the late Professor Ajulu in Kisumu. Professor Ajulu succumbed to complications of pancreatic cancer in Pretoria, South Africa on December 27th, and his body was flown home yesterday. Several dignitaries, among them Kisumu Governor Jack Ranguma, Siaya Senator James Orengo, and former legislator Gitobu Imanyara attended this service. Professor Ajulu will be remembered for his outstanding intellectual achievements both in his homeland, Kenya, and South Africa, where he resided. Ajulu had over the years lent his intellectual mind to causes such as the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and the education of the African child.
Time. As someone has written, Rock was the kind of a man you knew without knowing. He is not the kind of a person you needed to meet to know. Like Mandela, or like Jesus Christ, his reputation preceded. Professor Ajulu will go in the books of history as a Pan-Africanist who influenced and shaped African thinking, and indeed we have heard from many of his close friends who are speaking here.
Ajulu one time told me, and this I think is one of the things that has guided me in my political life, that democracy works, but that is not good enough. You must make democracy work, wherever you are. And he also told me that leaders are elected, but to find good leaders is also very difficult. Most of the time, you will not find good leaders. So you must make leaders good. They cannot become good on their own. And this, I think, has motivated me a lot during the entire struggle for democracy and our politics here in Kenya.
Well, he may not have been well known at home, that is here in Kenya, but Professor Ajulu lived a life full of illustrious, he lived a full illustrious life and was adopted home in South Africa. Here's a sneak peek of the life of Ajulu as told by his close friends and family. The production is by Clifford Derrick, who is a producer with the Mzansi Africa Communications Network. Take a look.
My name is Ajulu, Ajulu, Professor Ajulu. I'm a academic background, have political economist, and I've taught at a number of universities, both here and abroad. I'm Kenyan. I've written extensively on Kenya.
When he was writing his A-levels, you wrote your name, your surname first, Ajulu, comma, whatever. So he'd written Ajulu as the surname, obviously, comma, Richard Odero Karosa, K apostrophe Rosa. And I suppose that at the university, they looked at all these long names and just said Rock. So Richard Odero Karosa became Rock.
Rock, when we were at the University of Nairobi from 1972, he was not called Rock. Then within a year or two, he changed the name and said, now I'm called Rock. And it was a period when there were a lot of people who changed their names at that time. Mind you that people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o was called James Ngugi. He changed his name. And some of the students say, no, we're going to change our name. I don't know why Ajulu changed his name to Rock. He was not Rock when we started at the university.
Rock would become part of a radical university students that were seeking change, seeking transformation when they realized that the political regime then had settled for compromise.
They had a problem with the country being turned into a de jure one-party state.
Though Kenyans may not know that much, but Professor, among others, were those that actually started the issues of real democracy, the issues of multipartyism and the rights of people, democratic rights in the country in the 1974, to be more precise, when they started the student uprising, which was trying to ensure that the one-party system in the country at that time was not the best route to take, and Professor was one of the leading students in that.
As students, leaders then, they really organized serious campaigns against the government of the day. And for that reason, he was thrown in jail, that he had detention without trial so many times, until it got to a point that they could not sustain it anymore.
And my nephew would be expelled, along other friends like Jim Orengo, among others. So he stayed in limbo for a while and would eventually, going through Tanzania, would end up in Bulgaria, where he spent quite some time. And after that, would move to Lesotho.
Rock came into Lesotho. He apparently fled Kenya earlier on in his early university years and fled to Eastern Europe. But I think he decided he was more comfortable dealing with issues of Africa from an African base. He left Eastern Europe and came to Lesotho. And we formed an organization that was called the Committee for Action and Solidarity for Southern Africa. Ajulu was the first chairman of that committee, and I was its first secretary general.
I heard that that organization that we had started under the command of Kresani had been taken over by a raging, rabid, Marxist-Leninist, thunderous, radical activist from Kenya. And I couldn't believe a Kenyan could be radical and Marxist-Leninist, so I thought it was just mumbo-jumbo.
And there was a time when in Lesotho, the youth got out of control and were leading the party that they were supposed to be the youth. And an analysis that we made in the Vanguard and other publications, Ajulu was good at writing, forced the then youth in Lesotho to force the government to, kick him out of Lesotho. He left Lesotho and went to the UK, but that allowed him to be able to pursue his studies. He did his postgraduate studies in the UK and got this PhD and came back.
I met him later in London. He had just finished his teaching stint at Leeds, and I was doing my PhD at York University. Just at that time, the Robben Island prisoners, lifetime prisoners, were released. So there was a huge rally in London, and I met him there. I came home immediately after that to assist in the preparation of our people coming back from exile and in ensuring the election of 1994. I came into South Africa around 1992 and settled at the University of Rhodes. And I was at that time teaching at the University of Fort Hare, which is not very far from Rhodes.
I think at the time he was also editing some books, and one of the books he edited was the one about the life of his wife's father. And I think that's where he met his wife and got married.
We started our relationship then. We got married in 1996, and between us we have 5 children. The youngest of them is 16.
I'm Rock's youngest, currently 16, turning 17 in November, still a while away. I'm Malindi, I'm Obango, Mzwelandile, I'm Mzondi, I'm all those names. But my dad commonly referred to me as Obango. There was also Woodkodero, which was used. But Obango was when I was in trouble. So whenever I did hear Obango, I knew to run.
The past 4 months have been interesting and also sad for me because I walked that journey with him from when he got sick, and I used to spend a lot of time with him in the hospital, and also used to spend time with him when we chat. We'll sit out here in the veranda and we'll chat. He told me about things he wanted to do when he got well.
It was difficult when I found out that he was ill, and when we found out about his diagnosis. I had just moved to London, and that was 4 months ago. So it seems like a long fought battle, but actually it wasn't that much time. And I think, processing that information all the while knowing that the prognosis was terminal, that was what was difficult. It's hard not to bury someone before they die when you know that they're probably not going to make it.
In a sense, part of all those who knew him, part of us has also died with him. He was an important source of strength for us, a light, at the end of the tunnel. So with his death, we mourn him greatly, and we have lost a great friend, a comrade, a fighter for freedom, an internationalist, a good person.
I've just lost an incredible man.
Quite a man he was, but let's of course focus on other things. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and India Prime Minister Narendra Modi this week held bilateral talks geared towards bolstering cooperation between the two countries. The leaders discussed ways of stepping up partnerships for the benefit of the people of their countries in several areas, including combating terrorism, drug and human trafficking, health, energy, technology, agriculture, education, capacity building and trade. President Kenyatta pitched for India to improve market access for Kenyan products with high demand in India, such as leather products and pulses. He also urged India to review its trade policies to ensure Kenyan goods were not at disadvantage in relation to other East African exports. Ahead of the bilateral talks, he was officially received at the residence of the Indian president in New Delhi.
India's strength in the provision of health services is globally acknowledged. Indeed, many of our countrymen and women travel to India every year. Advanced technology, coupled with price competitiveness, makes your country a preferred destination for thousands of Kenyans seeking quality health care.
To boost trade, we are also cooperating on trade facilitation measures, including standardization and related areas, broad-based and wide-ranging cooperation in agriculture and food security is our shared priority. We are collaborating to raise agriculture productivity in Kenya. The line of credit agreement of $100 million signed for agriculture mechanization would open a new dimension of engagement. Long-term arrangement with Kenya.
Now, the 8th Vibrant Gujarat Global Summit in Gandhinagar, India, has not just brought goodies to Kenya. Rwanda has too reaped big from the visit and attendance of the summit by President Paul Kagame. President Kagame and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed on, among other things, India's lines of credit to $120 that is expected to bring irrigation to 41,190 hectares in Rwanda.
Indian investors and East Africans of Indian origin continue to make important contributions to our region's dynamism. Trade between India and Rwanda is growing. Indian businesses in the manufacturing and other sectors are playing a role in our economy as long-term investors.
All right, we are now joined on phone by our correspondent in Rwanda, Eugene Nangwe, for this and many other stories that have made headlines in Rwanda this week. A very good evening to you, Eugene. Thank you very much for joining us here on Bottomline East Africa. Are Rwandans excited about that visit by the president to India? What exactly did it mean for them?
Akisa, good evening to you. Of course, it was a very eventful week based on this visit by President Kagame in India. And of course, there is excitement on the ground, especially for those who frequently need flying to India, because one of the major announcement that was made from this particular summit is the introduction of direct flights by Rwanda, that is Rwanda's national carrier, to the city of Mumbai from April this year. And of course, this is one kind of information that is exciting the market, and the experts are believing that the new direct service will definitely help to boost the bilateral trade and also encourage tourism, because, Rwanda is trying to market itself also as a tourist destination and also an entry point for those who are flying from India into, the Eastern Africa region. So it was a very exciting week, and also this particular visit by President Kagame to India has excited many around here. Akisa, maybe I can just let you know that, President Kagame during his speech mentioned the fact that it was important that, Africa should diversify its exports to India and move beyond just oil and minerals. So when you listen to this, you'll really feel like the president is trying to ensure that the locally made products from Rwanda, as we try to push for the Made in Rwanda campaign, also get their way into India, apart from the minerals and oil. Akisa.
All right, Eugene, apart from that, we understand that we are expecting a royalty burial in Rwanda. Keep us up to date with that and other stories that have made headlines in Rwanda this week.
Right. As I hinted last week, the last king of Rwanda, that is King Kigeli V, who died in the United States in exile in October 2016, is expected to be laid to rest this Sunday in the district called Nyanza, and that is in Rwanda's southern province. You'll understand that there was a court battle between family members on whether he should have been buried in the United States where he had died from, or be brought back to Rwanda. And the U.S. court had actually decided that his body was to be repatriated back to Rwanda. And so the burial ceremony will happen this Sunday. It's been a low-key event, Akisa, I'll tell you. And of course, partly because Rwanda seems to be showing that it moved on from the issues of monarchy and it seems it's a republic. There hasn't been much activity around this burial of the last king of Rwanda.
Eugene, thank you very much for keeping us up to date. That is our correspondent from Rwanda, Eugene Anangwe, joining us here on Bottomline East Africa. Thank you very much. But at this point, we'll take a short break here on Bottomline East Africa. Don't go too far. As I mentioned, a conversation about the policies and politics in the East African region. And joining me in studio will be Joseph Kioko, who is a public policy analyst. Do not miss that conversation. Let's take that breather.